with that being said, somebody, Valley News Live posted that you had about $130,000 of campaign donations. Mm-hmm. So when we see stuff like that, that's where we get a little bit, our eyebrows raised, and like, where is that money coming from? Is it actually from people here that have our best interest, or is it outside groups?
Yeah. So, raised quite a bit of money. Like I said, I've been in electoral politics since 2012. So I've built up a good amount of supporters and folks who have contributed to my races in the past. And of that 128,000, downtown is part of my legislative district. I live just north of downtown. I spend most of my free time down there. So, I see it every day. And part of it is first we start asking ourselves, why is there a concentration of homeless people in downtown? And you referenced, a number of organizations. There's family health care. There's a number of resources. The bus depot is there. And like everyone else, people want to hang out downtown, right? Whether they're homeless or not. Yeah. And so what I'm excited about is with the evolution of the Downtown Engagement Center, and now that last week we've opened the Resource and Referral Center, the experience of those folks should hopefully shift, because what happens is, you're homeless or you're trying to get economics. If we're going to be implementing evolving technology in the city, whether it's through law enforcement, whether it's through public works, whether it's through any other, the reading of water meters, which is one of the tools people are going to be able to see their water usage in real time. We have to have those conversations with the public and see where their comfort level is on some of that. Some of it might be great and save us money and create efficiencies, but if it means we have to give up some of our individual liberties, that's worth having a conversation about.
Here's a good transition from the flat cameras right into COVID. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
all right. Welcome back to another episode of Ill Eagle Culture Brands Red Tape Talk. I'm your host, John Ostos, aka Ill Eagle CEO, and I'm here with my two counterparts, Dion Two Cup Larry and Cody Big Meat Mauk. What's going on, guys?
Good.
And today we have another guest to add to our Fargo election series of podcasts that we've been doing. So Josh Boschee, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah, pleasure to have you. So to start things off here real quick, you're currently legislature, right?
Correct. Yep.
And now you're running for mayor of Fargo, North Dakota.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right in and get some questions asked.
Yeah, with that being said, I think you might be our last candidate on the pod for mayoral race. We only have a week left until we vote, so...
That's true.
Early vote starts on Tuesday. Folks can go up to the Fargo Dome, the Ramada on 13th, or the Fargo Sports Center through the rest of the week. And then Election Day has multiple other options on the 9th of June.
Yeah, so nice. I mean, we got one other candidate we're looking to get on, I think, and
Denise.
Yep.
Kopak.
And then we'll see if she can come on within the week, or we'll be done.
By the way, I was trying everything just to make sure that you heard that we were trying to get you.
Yeah.
So I wasn't trying to attack anybody or anything. No, I was like, hey,
I'm glad you did.
Looking at you.
Yeah. Well, you said, an email, or you tried to reach out that way, and I didn't see anything. So yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Just trying to get all eyes on all the candidates and help people make an informed decision. Because obviously not everybody is looking at the same media outlets and whatnot. So it's always good to get your name out there and show people what you really are like.
Yeah. What's great about, groups like you guys, a podcast here, is you have a different audience, maybe even an audience that may not vote in the June election. I mean, It's such a low turnout election that the more people who can get connected and understand the impacts of whether it's the mayor's race, the city commission, school board, park board, all of those have an impact on our pocketbooks.
Do you know what the average is?
Average is well below 20%. So 4 years ago, only 14,500 people cast their ballot for the mayor. That's at a time while our city is growing, and we're at about 140,000 people now. 4 years before that, it was approximately 18,000 people voted. And that was 2020, so COVID. We mailed out ballot applications to folks, or the city and county mailed out ballot applications to folks, so that helped gin that up a little bit. But yeah, it's such a low turnout. People are so used to November elections, but then this is a midterm year, so the president's not on the top of the ticket. So yeah, the more we can get people eyes on and paying attention and get involved, the better.
I think I'll be interested to see the total number, but I think that might change this go around.
I agree.
Just going off of everything that's been happening, we can dive right into that. But can you tell us, like, for some people that don't know who you are? Because honestly, I've never heard your name prior to this election series.
Sure.
And then I started to watch everything. This is probably my first time ever watching a Fargo mayoral debate, by the way. So if you can give us a backstory about who you are and where you're from.
Yeah. So I've called Fargo home since 2000. I came here to go to NDSU. Prior to that, grew up in Minot, North Dakota. All my family's up there. But stuck around here, worked at NDSU for a number of years, got involved in politics in 2008, helping people run for office.
Did you graduate with Josh Boschee?
I did not. He's a little older than I am.
A little older?
So, yeah,
okay.
Yep,
I see him every now and again throughout the community, so I had to ask.
Yeah, nope. I'm the other Josh from Minot.
Gotcha.
So Fargo's been home. Like I said, worked at NDSU right out of college. First job was recruiting students to go to NDSU. Then I worked in student activities, leadership programs, worked with fraternities and sororities. Last job there was in the Career Center, helping students prepare for life after college, whether they went to grad school or applying for jobs. And then ran for office in 2012. I'd worked on a lot of people's campaigns before. I helped people run for city commission, state legislature. That's the side of the work I like the best, is the strategy, the communications, helping good people win office. But then was asked several times in 2011, 2012 to run for the state legislature up in North Fargo. And after they wore me down a little bit, I said, sure, I'll give it a shot, and ran and was elected. So I've served in the state legislature since 2012, did 12 years in the House, and then the last 2 years I've been in the state Senate.
What got you into going from state legislature into the mayoral race? What was it?
Yeah, a lot of it is, I feel the shine of Fargo has really rubbed off. There was a period of time where I think there's a lot of excitement about things going on here. We were moving forward. It seemed like we all were kind of rowing in the same direction. And the last several years, it feels like that's worn off. And maybe that's a post-COVID thing.
I think that's a post-COVID thing.
Yeah. And so certainly some of that, but thought, there's an opportunity to come home. The mayor was termed out. It's going to be an open race. So see what I can bring from my experience in Bismarck, working with all kinds of folks delivering for Fargo, and see if I can bring that to the mayor's office.
Well, I can speak on behalf of all of us here that we really do appreciate you coming in. And the reason why I think that this is going to be a bigger election is because people are basically disgusted with happening at national politics, and they feel underrepresented. I don't think we've had any representation for decades now on both sides of the aisle. If you look back and go through, it seems like it just goes back and forth.
Sure.
Back and forth. And I think it's possibly designed to be like that. And so for us specifically, we've been really focused on the national politics for about 4 years now. And us three were rah, ready to go in 2024. And then something changed or didn't change. It just always was the same. And so we're at the point where, and I think George Carlin, I think he said, if the vote actually mattered, they wouldn't let you do it.
Yep.
It's one big club and you're not in it. And so basically we've just been so sick and tired of what's happening at the top. Let's start focusing what's next to us and what's in front of us, what's around us, what affects our daily lives, what affects our communities, our brothers, sisters, our children. And so that's why we tried really hard to get into this Fargo mayoral race, and just to make sure that our future right here at home is something that we can affect. And so that's basically why we're kind of just switching gears. Okay. It seems,
if I could just say something, I think that's great, because as we were talking earlier, right, less people are engaged with the local elections.
Right.
They don't pay attention. Most people won't be able to name who the city commissioners are.
Right.
Most people don't know who their state legislator is.
Right.
They might know who their governor is, but it's that top of the ticket, those national conversations that we hear a lot of, and it's where a lot of us, I think, feel disenfranchised, regardless of your party or the president or Congress. It just feels like they go there and they hang out and they don't really accomplish much. But back home, whether the state legislature, what's interesting and what I've really learned as I'm running for mayor is the legislature, when we pass laws, they usually don't go into effect for several months. And then it takes a while for it to get actuated. But local government, I'm learning, mayor, city commission, park board, school board, literally the next day, dirt can turn. Change can happen the next day because of how quickly things can get implemented one way or the other. And so, again, I think kudos for you guys to pay attention and help get more eyes on these local races.
Yeah, and I really do hope that more people paying attention now. But it seems like more and more, the more people start paying attention, the more politics is involved all around money and power, especially at the national election, but mostly money. We just saw a congressional race that was $20 million, right? Swung in one way. The most expensive congressional race that we've ever had, I think. So with that being said, somebody, Valley News Live posted that you had about $130,000 of campaign donations. So when we see stuff like that, that's where we get a little bit, our eyebrows raised, and like, where is that money coming from? Is it actually from people here that have our best interest, or is it outside groups?
Yeah. So, raised quite a bit of money. Like I said, I've been in electoral politics since 2012. So I've built up a good amount of supporters and folks who have contributed to my races in the past. And of that 128,000 at that filing report, it represents about 630 individual donors. And of that, approximately 55% of people are from Fargo, 81% are from North Dakota. So really, it's a lot of folks here. It is right in our backyard, folks who care about Fargo, care about North Dakota, and how we move forward. Now, I know, probably the question behind the question is the fact that there, was a large contribution from a PAC. It's part of an affiliate network that I'm a part of. I'm what's called a New Deal leader. It's a cohort of pragmatic Democrats who work to try to get things done. So it's not about bomb throwing or trying to score points online. It's about how do we actually solve the problems that are facing our community. A lot of times we get dinged for being one of those folks because we're seen as compromisers. We're seen as working across the aisle at effectuating change by working with whoever is willing to work with us on that issue. And for me, it's really been about delivering on affordable housing, working on things related to our public schools, and then property tax relief here in North Dakota.
Does that PAC specifically deal with like local politics, or does it geopolitics as well?
So that PAC, and let me see, Next 50 was the name of the PAC. So they endorse 50 candidates across the country from the bottom all the way up to potentially the top, but they only endorse 50 people. So I was one of 50 people across the country this year to receive their support. And so, all levels of government, but they're getting much more involved in local races. Again, talking kind of like you were talking about, people are realizing that you can make a lot of good change at the local level. And there's opportunities to actually make progress across our country at a time when state legislatures are locked in divisiveness. Congress isn't really moving the needle on things. So we're seeing that across the political spectrum. In terms of groups that are starting to get involved in local races.
With the more information that's coming out with all of these data centers, what I'm like 50-50 on it. Like, I see the good, but I also see a lot of the bad. So if these billionaires were to come approach you saying, hey, can we put a data center, south of town of South Fargo? What are you going to say?
At this point, I would say we'd have to pause. We have to figure this out because a lot of people are trying to figure this out, right? The data centers, and especially here in North Dakota and across rural America, is being driven by, it's a real estate deal, essentially, right? They're trying to build a facility that's going to be rented by whether it's one company that's going to store their equipment there and or servers and run things through, or multiple. And so they're at a race to try to get that land, to get that stuff secured so that they can start securing their contracts. My greatest concern is not only the impacts to our community in terms of increased energy prices, what happens with our water and how that's used, but even more so, North Dakota is an extraction state. And we've been that way forever, right? Whether it was coal in the 70s, and now we've had oil the last 2 decades, which I've been a part of in the legislature. conversation about wind, solar, and now data centers. And I think the challenge we've done the problem we've done as a state is we are so hungry for investments in our state that we're willing to let people just do what they want or need to come here, instead of us maybe now flipping that script as a state and a local community or the county, whoever's in charge of that zoning, and saying, we'd love to have you here, but these are the rules. And those rules might include how you develop the land, how energy infrastructure is built up, whether it can be spread over ratepayers or if it has to be solely funded by that developer. And for me, even more importantly, what happens when this facility is no longer in use? And what responsibility is there for making sure that either it gets repurposed or that it doesn't have an impact on our communities? And we've seen these data centers in many other parts of the country, but even here in North Dakota, Ellendale, Williston has had conversations around it, Mercer County out in western North Dakota, and of course in our own backyard up here in Harwood. So the quick answer to the question is, I'd say we need to pause and slow down and figure out and ask these questions and let the community ask these questions. But more so, I really want to push the legislature and our governor to say, how do we make sure this is a win for North Dakota, regardless of what type of industrial development happens here? People are always going to come to a state like North Dakota to extract. And those are one-time resources a lot of times. So what are we doing to make sure that investment stays here?
That's what it seems like. It's like we're like this rich state, but they treat us like a doormat because there's 600, 800,000 people here. So they want all of our resources, but they don't want to give back to the people that actually live here.
Right. And some of that lays at the feet of the legislature and the executive branch in North Dakota. We've allowed it to happen. In the 90s and early 2000s, we were telling the whole country to come to North Dakota. We have cheap labor. Come here. It's low quality, not low, cheaper quality of life, right? Or less expensive to invest here. And now we're dealing with, we can't keep nurses and teachers and other professionals because our salaries haven't kept up with other parts of the country. And that's kind of a legacy that's left behind that we have to figure out. And how do we make sure, again, if you're coming here, we'd love to have you, be a good neighbor, but you also have to make sure that North Dakotans come first.
So I've got a lot of teacher friends. I'm a recruiter for the Guard, so I'm in and out of schools. I made friends with a lot of these educators, and their job is really hard. Why isn't it that we cannot get them more money? With all this oil money that supposedly we have, why can't we just pay the educators more? It seems like I don't want to say that our education system is failing, but I feel like we should be doing a lot better than what we are. Yeah. And that comes to making sure that we have the right people in the right spots, getting paid the right amount of money.
Yeah. Teachers' work is thankless sometimes these days. I've been in a couple classrooms over the last couple months. Middle school and high school have been invited to come and kind of be like a guest judge if they're doing an activity as a legislator, and specifically in middle school, watching these teachers, just the way that they're able to redirect these students in such a positive way. I just kept staring at them being like, I would have got yelled at. Like, we got yelled at. That's how our teachers disciplined us back in my generation, but they do such a good job. In terms of pay, we were doing a great job. So my first legislative session was 2013. That's when the oil money started coming in. We did prioritize public education and a lot of that. We got North Dakota into the top 10 highest paying states for teachers. And in the last decade, we've actually dropped significantly. And that's because, again, the rest of the country has had a need for teachers. So they were able to do that. And we're actually losing our teachers to some of those states now. So I think it needs to be more of a priority. The challenge for us as legislators is public education really is also at the local level, right? So the school districts are the ones that negotiate contracts with their teachers, set their salaries, and everything that goes with that. The legislature helps fund that. We right now for a kid in any of the schools across the state, it's approximately $12,000 per kid that comes back to the school district from state. And North Dakota is one of the highest per student states that the state funds. Usually it's inverse. Most states are only paying 20 to 30%, and the locals are paying most of it. But that's been part of the conversation is as we increase the amount of state funding, are we making sure that it goes to teachers? And there's been times where when we've done a 3% increase, we've said that a language that, a certain percentage that has to make sure it's going to teachers. Because the other thing we're seeing is that, school districts are increasing the number of administrators.
Right.
Administrators are paid quite a bit more.
Yep.
And so I know that's a conversation with our local school board right now as they look at their budget deficit of how do we right size that so that we're making sure we're getting the teachers and the support to teachers and kids in the classrooms.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most important things that we should be focusing on is education because, okay, one thing that I think that might be the right move from the Trump administration is sending education back to the states for the states to decide what they should do. Yes or no?
Let me take a swig. Yes.
Because of things like the No Child Left Behind Act.
Right.
I think that was an abysmal thing, and we're still dealing with that today because no kid should, this might sound harsh, but I don't believe that no kid should be able to graduate if they cannot pass the ASVAB or write their name, sign their name.
Yeah.
They can't sign their name right now.
Right. The
print
literacy is,
They don't teach cursive anymore.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
stuff like legislation like that, what do you feel? How do you feel about this, the education coming back to the state?
Yeah, I think it's important, and we love that we get to drive our own curriculum, and that's actually what happens for the most part. Is the state develops the curriculum, and then the school boards have even more important say in that. So the local level, the feds started getting more involved when it got around things like civil rights, and especially kids with disabilities, because there were states that were just horrible and didn't
Sure.
want to do anything on it.
Sure.
And that's where you'll see a bulk of that federal funding is coming for students with disabilities and then low-income kids, homeless kids, things like that. So, but as a state, we want to be able to drive the bus because we want to make sure our kids are competitive, that we're able to retain them. North Dakota and a little bit of Minnesota, we have this peak since 2008 of our graduation rates right now. This year, next year, well, you probably know this as a recruiter, right? Is their peak graduation rates, and then after that, it falls off because families have less kids. Things like that, or starting later to have kids.
Yep.
The rest of the country has already gone off that peak. So my concern as someone who serves on the higher education committees and the Senate Education Committee is telling our communities now is our time to lock in these kids and try to keep them here now so they don't go to college somewhere else or leave the state for the workforce because the rest of the country's coming for them. Because we've got, again, the resource, people are going to come and try to extract it. So what can we do to incentivize to make sure our kids stay here?
Yeah.
And start their families and stay in our workforce or go to school or whatever they decide to do. State of 800,000, we lose a lot of kids. That makes a big impact in the long run.
Is there anything for Fargo? Would it be possible to, I don't know how to say this, like for people that can't afford to go to schools like Shanley or Capstone, would there be anything like out there to incentivize being able to send your kids to those type of schools?
Well, the feds have created now education savings accounts, and that's all being worked out at the state level to figure out what does that look like in terms of individuals can and families specifically, so can put money into a tax deferred account for that folks to be able to afford private education. So it's a way to make sure that public dollars aren't necessarily going to private schools, but allows a tax advantage for families or donors or individuals to donate towards, so that some kids may have that choice if that school's willing to accept them. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I grew up with I went to a St. John's Catholic school in Wapton, and we had a class of 14 or 15. But for me specifically, I'm pretty sure that I have ADD or ADHD, one of the two. So I would need to be in a small classroom, and I'm sure that one of my kids is probably the same, probably my daughter Rhea. But with where we're living, that's impossible. We're going to be at Horace. They would be going to Horace High School. And so with these class sizes, there's 300-400 kids in one class, and that's kind of tough. So I mean, anything that Fargo would be able to do, and in order, I don't know if it's just Fargo or North Dakota in general, but.
Well, and the challenge that comes with that is, so I went to Catholic school from junior high through high school. So Bishop Ryan up in Minot. The challenge isn't as much about the number of kids being able to go to those private education opportunities, whether it's a parochial school or non-religious private school. the biggest challenge is whether those schools are going to accept kids.
Oh, sure.
That is the flip of it, right? And that's why we get concerned about public money going.
That's true.
That,
yeah, that's true.
is because if they aren't willing to accept all kids, especially kids with, emotional issues or behavior issues or disability, those kids, and that becomes an impact to our public schools, is because those schools don't have the resources. They recognize that.
Yeah.
So a lot more of that burden falls on the public education. I think a solution is, and it becomes an expensive solution to us as taxpayers, but how do we get back to having neighborhood schools? How do we get back to having smaller schools in our community? But that costs money from a building perspective, staff. My neighborhood up in North Fargo, we have neighborhood schools, and that's something we've been kind of fighting with the school board about. But 3 of the small schools are now consolidating to have a newer elementary school on the north side. The win of that is this is, our buildings are 100 years old right now, and we're going to have a brand new building on the north side. So our kids are going to probably have some of the best
That's awesome.
education environment. But with that, we're sacrificing our smaller classrooms or our neighborhood schools where kids could walk 6 blocks to their school.
Sure. Sure.
Makes sense.
John, you want to hit up one of the questions? I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, go for it. So let's keep it moving in the same direction, but kind of backstep a little bit and talk about some of your accomplishments. So you've been in Bismarck since 2013.
Yeah.
What would you say was your greatest accomplishment, and then what was your what was your best learning experience as a legislative representative?
Yeah. So an accomplishment, we'll talk about one primary, and if we have time, I'll get to the second one that I'm really proud of, is around housing affordability and our homeless crisis across the state. So I'm a real estate agent when I'm not in Bismarck. We're only in Bismarck 4 months every 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So I was there January 2025 to the first week of May 2025. Now I'm here in Fargo, 1.5 years. I bebop for daily meetings out in Bismarck. So like Wednesday, I'll head out there for a day meeting, come back. But prior to January 2025, we spent a year, housing advocates, folks working with the homeless community, working with what we call a study committee. So that's what we do in the interim, or in that 1.5 years, is representatives and senators sit on committees and study a variety of issues. And then we were looking at the homelessness issue in the state. And we were able to educate that committee enough. And the chair of that committee was a pretty conservative guy from West Fargo who said there's probably no way he's going to support some of these initiatives, to him being a champion of it with us. And so Representative Ben Koppelman out of West Fargo, myself, and these housing advocates were able to introduce legislation at the beginning of the 2025 session. And the outcome of that, through a lot of different conversations throughout the 4 months of the session, was we ended up quadrupling the amount of state investment in housing crisis money. So we went from $2.5 million to $10 million.
Wow.
To go to nonprofits like the New Life Center here in Fargo, the YWCA, homeless shelters across the state, to help get people housed and hopefully keep people in housing if they already have it. That's a big challenge. If we could just stop that fall off of people losing the current housing. But then also we were able to get a one-time cash infusion of $25 million into what's called the Housing Incentive Fund. And that's a product or a fund that the legislature created in 2013 to address housing affordability, specifically starting out in Western North Dakota during the oil boom. It has now evolved, and it's essentially the state putting our one-time cash from excess oil money goes into this bucket, and then that's used as a financing tool to help build affordable housing across the state. So multifamily, but we've also now evolved that into single family. So places like Langdon, North Dakota have built some single family homes. You can't build a house for what it costs to live in a community like that, so it subsidizes it, but it's getting new housing and workforce housing in those communities. And then the other part that's evolved there and we're excited about is rehab. So there's a lot of rural communities that have houses that just need roofs and windows and HVAC updated, but it's good bones. So how can we invest in some of that to help with housing throughout the state? So that I'm super proud of, because it's all being deployed right now and we're having to show the outcomes of how that money is being used. But what that meant was also, as we deal with the homelessness issues here in our community, a lot of that is driven because other parts of the state don't have resources. So people who are homeless end up in a place like Fargo or Cass County. My hometown of Minot, for years, as long as I knew, the solution to homelessness was buying a bus ticket and sending someone to Bismarck or Fargo. It became Bismarck or Fargo's problem, right? Now with some of this money, we can help Bismarck or Minot or these other communities shore up things and get resources that they need so that they can take care of folks within their own community. And these people are near their family supports, near places where they've already been working or building relationships, and then hopefully slowing that impact on a community like Fargo. So that's my one of my biggest proud moments is that, again, it was 2 years of work. It was working across the aisle. It was empowering the advocates of the homeless community and affordable housing and how do we use the legislative process. We're fortunate the state has the financial resources to invest in things like that. Now our job is to show the outcomes. We have to show that this was a good investment because a lot of these legislators were like, we'll give you the shot, but this money might not even be here the next time we come back, depending on how oil's doing, right? So we have to be able to prove the theory and show that it's actually doing what we said it was instead of just money out the door to nonprofits or into the ether, and we just blew $10 million.
It's a great idea for work. I travel quite a bit around the state and Minnesota and North Dakota, and I go to some of those small towns. I'm like, holy moly, these are some beat up old houses, but honestly, just some work to them and they'll be okay. So it is crazy just to see how many places are either abandoned or like people are just slumming it out there. And I feel for them, because they don't.
Well, and what we hear from those communities is because that housing is becoming a substandard or kind of absent landlords, those small communities are dealing with drugs as much as we are. And so again, if we can get these communities, in some communities it's a block of houses, if we can get those fixed up so that, a new younger person graduating from high school or whatever can afford to live there, or they're starting their family, it keeps kids in that school. That housing stock, we're not, letting it dilapidate, and then housing gets more unaffordable for folks. So I'm excited because there's a lot of great people across the state working on this. There's community and regional organizations, specifically in the northeast corner of the state, that have really been, I talked about Langdon, but they've been really doing this for a couple of years, and now we finally been able to get some money to them so they can prove the concept. So now communities throughout the state can say, this is how we do it.
Nice.
I have one rebuttal here.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the past three candidates, we've all talked about downtown Fargo. And now with the new Life Center being downtown, we have the Engagement Center being downtown. We have Red Cross being downtown. It seems like downtown is a hub for the homeless population. So what is your plan and able to get those people moved into? Because downtown it's basically the crowning jewel of North Dakota.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody comes and visits downtown Fargo because it's really cool. But going through and seeing the homeless population on the streets, seeing they can tend to push people away to not want to go downtown. Myself included, try to avoid it as much as I can because I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. So what is the plan with that?
So downtown is part of my legislative district. I live just north of downtown. I spend most of my free time down there. So, I see it every day. And part of it is first we start asking ourselves, why is there a concentration of homeless people in downtown? And you referenced, a number of organizations. There's family health care. There's a number of resources. The bus depot is there. And like everyone else, people want to hang out downtown, right? Whether they're homeless or not. Yeah. And so what I'm excited about is with the evolution of the Downtown Engagement Center, and now that last week we've opened the Resource and Referral Center, the experience of those folks should hopefully shift, because what happens is, you're homeless or you're trying to get economic assistance, you're low income, but you got to go from this organization, they got to go talk to this state agency over here, and they got to go talk to the county over here. And that's bus rides or Uber rides all over town, taking time, and probably just give up after a period of time. The Resource and Referral Center is going to have 24 nonprofits, state agencies, local providers, all under one roof. So the idea is that we can, I think, do a better job of helping people, and they only have to come to one spot to get the support that they need. And then also those organizations are working together and saying, this is John, John's not having to go and advocate for himself from organization to organization, but instead they can have conversations together about, okay, we'll get you signed up for Medicaid. We'll make sure we get you, let's figure out some job training, what you can do, things like that. So I'm hopeful. It's a model that has worked in other communities. We've spent the last 2 years, I think the public conversation didn't help. In the last 2 years, the city commission talked about it it evolved into a conversation about us versus them, homeless people versus shop owners, homeless people versus those that visit downtown, homeless people versus, instead of the real the truth of it that came out in the very end. And Commissioner John Strantz wrote a letter to the editor that basically reminded us all that the DEC, or the Downtown Engagement Center, that was a COVID response, and that facility was never meant to provide services to people. So had we started the conversation with, we need to do a better job of providing services for these folks, and this is not the right location to do it, instead of, it's downtown and we don't like looking at homeless people, I think that would have changed the narrative a lot, and we would have been able to rally the community a lot better to say, yeah, we can do a better job, and let's get people housed. Because that's, in the end, the biggest thing is if we can get these folks housed and the supports they need, whether it's behavioral health or addiction, jobs, a lot of homeless people are working, right? They just can't afford rent, or they have a ding on their credit that they're not able to get rent. Sure. We had, when I worked, I was the chair of the Homeless Coalition 15 some years ago. I don't remember what year that was. So I was learning a lot about the homeless population. And at that time, Fargo in the metro area was starting what we call single point of entry. So the idea was using technology to say that when Cody showed up at New Life Center, New Life would be able to see that Cody had already been to 3 other spaces, or maybe New Life didn't fit Cody because I don't know if they accept kids or not, but you had a son with you, but let's make sure we get Cody over to this space. And they worked together to make sure people got the right services from a sheltering standpoint. And now that has evolved to the resource and referral center. So again, getting everyone under a similar roof and whatnot. But back then, the issue was we still had homeless people. We just didn't see them as much. And then COVID had happened. So when we had the Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund, which was money that was set aside that said, Dion, you're a landlord, you're willing to rent to somebody who's got a case manager assigned to them. If they do something physically to the property, this Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund will spot you. We'll fix the holes in the wall, we'll replace the door, we'll replace the window, do what needs to be done so you can rent that property again. We had a lot of landlords that were tapping into that. They were excited. They were willing to help make sure we got people housed. But then when COVID happened, the state screwed it up because we got all this federal money to keep people housed as they lost their jobs. And part of that was to make sure that landlords got paid, because for a lot of landlords, this was part of their job and their retirement and whatnot. But the state created this bureaucratic process to get people paid back, and we had a lot of landlords who went 6, 7, 8, 10 months without getting paid. And they told us, hey, we're trying. We want to make sure that people are staying housed, but I got bills to pay too. And so they've lost trust in those systems. And so we're trying to find those landlords again, or those people who own investment properties, to say, are you willing to take a risk again? We have these systems set up to support you. But there's a bad taste in a lot of folks' mouths. They tried to give folks a chance, but then the system worked against them on that.
Yeah.
2-part question.
Yeah.
First part, would you keep the engagement center downtown Fargo? Second part, do you think the engagement center is doing anything beneficial, or is it encouraging?
Tell me about what do you mean by encouraging?
So engagement center is handing out free needles, booth kits, all the above to, if you're into that sort of thing, right?
Right.
Rather than facing the problem, and I'm not saying that these people are not facing the problem, but to make it easy, making it easier, I guess, is it actually addressing the problem, or is it advocating for the problem?
I guess we'd have to look at what problem is it trying to address. So
if it's a specifically hard drug problem,
yeah,
right.
So, I'll go to your second question then about encouraging or enabling some of the language we've heard publicly. The point of the needle exchange program is to reduce the spread of communicable diseases, which is high among people who use intravenous drugs, who use needles to inject themselves with drugs. And so what we've seen is, since the implementation of it here in Cass County and across the state in 2018, a dramatic decrease in the spread of hepatitis C across our communities. And so that is working. But with it is, then it's also, as you said, maybe encouraging people to continue using drugs. What we also know is that folks are having access to Narcan. We know that people are getting referred to treatment, and people are entering treatment because it becomes a safe place for them to have those conversations. I don't know you guys have people in your lives that have lived through addiction and the disease of that. But, in our family, my uncle who alcohol and other drugs, he never really wanted treatment. And you can't force that on someone. They're not going to be successful, especially when we as taxpayers are paying for that usually through Medicaid and other funding sources. So the more we can get people access to treatment when they're ready for it, I think, I guess as in the in-between, if that means we're handing out needles to make sure that they're safe when they're doing it, they're not spreading diseases, that seems to be showing itself as far as a proven public health measure. So,
you don't see that as a form of enabling? My dad was a heroin addict, and he died a heroin addict because it never did anything for him to get, what were they doing for heroin? I never always forget the name of the
Narcan.
No, not Narcan.
Like medication assisted, something or other.
Yeah. So it was like the substitute for heroin. He would do that in between time.
No,
something like that though.
What did you say?
Suboxone.
So I can't remember the name of it, but it was really big thing in California back in the day. I remember when it was out, but it was something that I always saw he would do to carry him over to the next real hit, not necessarily benefiting him in any way. You know what I mean? And if you know anything about heroin, like coming off of heroin is horrific. Like it's a nightmare to watch someone try to kick it. They would rather keep doing the drug than to experience the coming down part. And so it to me, as the son of somebody who dealt with that type of addiction, I always saw it as him being enabled. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you have to suffer. You have to feel the pain. You have to go through those things to understand how bad it really is, instead of just like softening the blow all the time. And that's how I felt my dad was treating it. If he ever needed to, he can just run over to the clinic and get a hit, you know what I mean? And so it was weird stuff like that had I always look at it like, man, this is more of an enabling thing than anything, especially when it looks like to us as a community that's what they're doing. They're just sliding in to get their little fixes and whatever they need, or so they can get their hits with a needle or whatnot, and then that's all they use it for. They continue to stay homeless because we allow them to be homeless, and then they continue to stay addicts because we allow them to continue to get the hits they need.
Yeah, and Public Health has put out their report. 70% of the folks who access the needle exchange program are housed. They have an address, so it's not all homeless folks,
right?
And to the
70%, you said
70%.
Wow.
Yep. So they have an address. I don't purport to have the exact answer. I just know from a public health standpoint, we're reducing the spread of disease. We actually, the more we have talked about this publicly and people have questioned the effectiveness of it, and I'm not saying people shouldn't question it, but I think it's become a really kind of divisive isn't the word. What we're seeing is actually in the last 2 years now, less people have been going to that center, and we've started to see Hep C increase again in our community. So some people are, what that's telling us, or at least as it's been explained to me, is that people are accessing those resources less because they're afraid of being tied to what's going on there. Or in terms of, is somebody watching? Who's monitoring this? Is my data really safe? Things like that. So that's one thing that I think is concerning, is we were doing such a good job of dropping the number of people who were using or spreading Hep C specifically. Now we're starting to see a spike. And so I'm not placing that blame on anyone. I'm just saying that we know that it was working, and now we're seeing a reversal as we have this big conversation about it.
Who gets this data, or where does that data come from to show like?
So if you go to Fargo Cast Public Health's site, it'll be right there.
Cool.
Their annual report.
Awesome.
And they've actually been publishing stuff on their social media now about some of it. I think is a way to educate folks, because a lot more questions. We're a lot more aware of what's happening, and there's been questions about how is the money used and priorities, and it's for me at least, folks are getting treatment, access to treatment when they're ready for it. One thing I've learned, I was visiting with a provider here in town the other day who provides support to folks living in addiction and going through recovery, and their challenge is that they're like, we can't even get staff to staff. Like, we have enough beds now for people. We don't have nurses who are willing to work with people going through withdrawals, right? Because like you said, it's ugly. It's painful, and to be able to support someone through some of that. So that's the other side of it, is how do we make sure that we have a strong response network to be able to help people?
That would be my other question, would be if tax people are paying for the needle exchange program, wouldn't it be more beneficial to have some sort of center like that would be able to pay these people to get rehabbed?
Yeah, we do. It's through Medicaid. So
Okay.
we as
So
taxpayers
federal?
already pay through.
So it's not a matter of pay; it's a matter of desire to do that work.
right.
Gotcha.
Well, somewhat. That's kind of what I'm
Okay.
hearing from the provider. Yeah, we have. There's groups like Share House here, the Ridge.
What about state bonuses or, maybe local bonuses?
What do you mean by bonuses?
Like if you're having trouble getting nurses
Oh, sure.
to work there,
For the
would it be
workforce.
possible to have bonuses
Yeah.
for those specific people that work there?
Yeah, I think ideas like that.
Okay.
Folks are willing to go into that type of work. Yeah.
I hate to see, like, it just seems like we see that all the time where I'm not saying that is not working, because clearly the data shows that it is working, but I would rather see an end all solution to the problem, which maybe there isn't one. I don't know. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe that it is what it is.
Yeah. And that's where as I visited with the police chief last week, I got to spend some time with him. And one of the priorities for me is, how do we reduce access to drugs in our community? That's another piece of it. And that they're stuck trying to figure that out too. But then from a resource standpoint of law enforcement, of how much time can they spend on cases, making sure that they have things buttoned up because of protections people have on their home and property and whatnot when it comes to people who either have the product or are selling the product. So that's something I'm interested in visiting with them more about, is as we look at regionally our law enforcement and how they work together, but also with prosecutors, with others, about how do we just reduce the flow of this, make it so Fargo is not a desirable place for people to bring product through. But Fargo's entire history has been built on a river, railroads, and interstates. We are an intersection.
Yeah. They call it the gateway to the West.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's true for drugs.
So how do you, as a mayor, make it less desirable for those people?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. That's where I want to visit with law enforcement, see what's worked in other communities, what they think we need to do. What are the drug?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm naive to some of that.
How about piggybacking off that question?
Let me say around just drug consumption.
Right.
That's just not part of my circle or anything I've been exposed mostly to. So.
You didn't do a bunch of heavy drugs in college or anything like that? Drinking at least?
I was a good Catholic school kid.
Okay, good to go.
So was I, but just kidding.
So what about crime then? That that's the big talk right now in the mayoral race and within the city as well. As crime has gotten out of control, especially downtown, et cetera. So obviously, a lot of the drug stuff impacts the crime within this community. So what are some of the efforts that you want to implement right away as mayor?
Yeah. So again, visiting with the chief last week, he really opened my eyes to the challenges of enforcement. So some of the conversation has shifted, especially with the new police chief, of, we just need to enforce with the laws that are on the book, especially around behavior, some of the behavior downtown. And I'll tell you, my conversation with the homeless advocates are the same. They say there's plenty of bad actors, whether they're homeless or not, that they should be held accountable, right? And the challenge that at least the police chief painted for me was, the infrastructure we have as a community. So someone's having a behavioral health episode, and it might lead to them acting out or doing something illegal. So they take someone to the emergency room. The emergency room says we're full. So now that law enforcement officer has to try to find and see if another institution or medical facility will take them. And when there isn't anything, then they release them, because if you send them to jail, they don't get the treatment that they need. And then at times when our jail has been full, we've expanded the county jail now, and they're working on that. But the same is you cite people for public urination, that's not an arrestable offense. So trying to figure those things out about, again, how do we make sure our community is safe for people to walk around, to enjoy our community, but also holding people accountable. And I don't know what that looks like. One thing that the police chief talked about is that at one time there was more of a social detox facility. I didn't realize that maybe isn't there anymore. And by social detox, meaning if someone's under the influence of something, they go somewhere and be held there. It's not jail, but there'd be medical staff there, and they'd be able to sober up, and then be able to have conversations about resources. So, but the way he said it made it sound like that may not be available in our community anymore, and we have to figure that out. But Yeah. I don't have an answer, but I want to dig into it because people talk about it. But I will tell you, I've been running since January 6th is when I announced. And so part of the beginning of my campaign was hosting these listening sessions across town. So neighborhood conversations, invited the public, and knowing that public safety was the number one concern people keep bringing up, I asked folks, what does it mean to be safe in your neighborhood or in your home? And the conversations all went to traffic safety. It wasn't about there being a drug house at the corner of my street or that something violent happened in my neighborhood. The conversation was that I don't feel it's safe for my kids to be out in the front yard because drag racing, people running red lights, loud cars, things like that. And we've seen law enforcement, because when you look at their data, the increase of traffic citations and violations being found. So they're trying to do more around traffic. But it's just interesting that that's actually when people were talk about safety and had an opportunity to visit about it, they talked about traffic versus some of those other things.
I think that depends on what area you're living in.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
downtown versus South Fargo are different conversations, absolutely.
Right. But and we've said this before, but we're pretty good friends with a lot of people on the Fargo police force. But one thing I think that everybody can agree on is giving resources to the Fargo Police Department. With that being said, like, how do you ensure that is happening, but how do you balance the budget at the same time?
Yeah. So, I supported the public safety sales tax. I wouldn't be surprised if you guys did also. Mm-hmm. A lot of people in the community did, right? So, but what we're finding is a lot of that money is also just going into the general fund and then being parsed out to some different public safety initiatives. I want to be able to show to the public that specifically that funding source, it's approximately $8 million a year, is going directly to public safety. Instead of, so what a lot of it has done is just supplanted the existing law enforcement budget. So that doesn't always mean necessarily more cops. It means what resources do our law enforcement have? Are there other types of professionals that can be out handling some of the downtown behavior or loud parties near campus so that law enforcement can spend their time on investigating the serious crimes and the harder crimes that we're really concerned about? So really looking at, again, how are we parsing out that dedicated funding to make sure that it's going to what people.
I don't know if you know this, but we are very, very good at becoming national
news for
national
bad
news
things
for
happen.
bad things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we go viral.
We go. No. Like
the community.
Some of the videos that come out of Fargo is not great. And so, like, when you're dealing with stuff like that, I think that that's why I'm saying that the Fargo Police Department needs those resources to make sure that that stuff doesn't happen. It sounds like this new chief is like well regarded, top to bottom. Like, everybody loves this guy. So hopefully he can train these officers to do what they need to do. But I think that how do you with the Fargo budget right now is always being talked about, and they're talking about building the
convention center.
Now. So how do you balance all of that money?
Yeah, so the convention center is a separate funding.
Okay.
That's through the lodging tax
Gotcha.
that the voters put in. So, but the concern the city should have, and what we need to be very careful, and that's what the current commission is deliberating right now, is the building of it is one thing, but it's the operation of it that falls back on the city if it doesn't break even. The goal of the convention center is not to make money. It's to drive economic impact. So, right, bringing people here who are spending money, buying more stuff that leads to more sales tax and things like that.
So hosting large national events?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Conferences, conventions, things like that. In conjunction with things like the Fargo Dome, the Shields Arena. When we have those types of facilities, that brings people here. So from the budget perspective, though, one thing that, again, I think the city needs to do a better job of is educating the public on what is in their budget and how the budget is created. And I know that's probably boring for a lot of people, but at least the information's there. The city right now is continually being reactive to the concerns that the citizens are having instead of being proactive in how we communicate. So you went and built up a communication department using some COVID resources, but how is that being used to educate people on how the budget's developed or what taxes you pay are going into what bucket and whatnot? As I understand it, most most money just goes into what's called the general fund. So the checking account for the city. State, I'm used to, first thing I'm going to do is create this flow chart that'll be obnoxious and twist your eyes, but it shows every entry point that sales tax goes in here, lodging tax goes in here, and then it funnels to this and that. Initially, it's going to show that it all goes to the general fund. So it's just a bunch of arrows going to the general fund and then expenses coming out. But I'd rather us have again, that public safety sales tax, that have its own bucket, and we can show people what's coming out of that bucket as it relates to public safety. Again, more clear information on how things are being spent, and we can prioritize based on that.
Sure.
I've said publicly, at a couple of the debates that from the budget for developing of the 2027 budget, I want to stay within no greater than 1% growth from 2026. And that's to show restraint to the legislature, saying that we're able to do this because they put a 3% cap on the city and all the other political subdivisions, but also for us to go through an exercise of seeing, again, where can we find efficiencies? Where can we, I'm learning that departments don't really talk to each other. They're just starting to do this now, where they're finding, wait a minute, you have this software program that would work for this. I don't maybe need to go ask for $500,000 for a subscription to this. We can work together. Breaking down those silos, having the department leaders work together and understand that this year, if Public Works is getting 2 new snowplow drivers, Fire knows that next year it's going to be their turn for new employees. Having those conversations together about what's best for the city as we grow, versus this is my part, my budget is lawn, fire, police, Public Works, engineering, and them just having to fight it out within themselves instead of looking collaboratively. How do we grow our city and how do we provide the services that people want?
Is there anything right away when you become mayor that you cut in regards to city spending, like freeze, audit, or cut?
Especially post-COVID.
Yeah. So I don't know the budget intimately enough to be able to say I'm going to cut these 3 pencils from this department, right?
Okay.
What I will say is I want to put a pause on all capital projects. So that is the building of things. And I think that's one of the areas that we can probably have a little bit of restraint initially, is because people are our most important asset at the city, and that's the majority of any organization's budget. But again, looking at, as we meet the needs of the community, how are those prioritized? Are people willing to go down to having garbage picked up every other week instead of once a week? Is that something the public would be? I don't think so. So we can have that conversation.
A lot of sticky diapers right now.
Yeah. My garbage is like the size of the garbage that's inside. So I don't know how I'll do that, but I'll try.
So, but again, those are things that instead of us making decisions in a vacuum. So I'll back up even. The finance committee, which is now comprised of the entire commission, until 2 years ago, it was only the mayor and one commissioner.
Right.
It was the mayor and actually Dave Pepcorn for many years. Those meetings happened in private. The commissioners didn't know what the budget was until it was dropped on their desk right before the meeting. So now the entire commission is there, and those meetings are public. So we just went through the exercise last summer. I shouldn't say the exercise, the process of the city having each department leader come in front of that committee, and that's televised. Everyone can go watch and see when the police chief went up there, when the fire chief went up there, when public works director went up, and what they talked about. What I observed in those meetings is there wasn't clarity of what they were supposed to be providing. It wasn't everyone needs to bring me a 2% reduction in your budget so that you can account for raises for the people that are already there, right? Everyone just kind of came with what they wanted. And what I've learned is, as part of that process, then going into this year, many of those department leaders didn't see their final budget until hours before it was about to be authorized. So they didn't even know where the cut was made. If it was $1 million cut to their department, they had to go figure out and look in their budget. Was it that software program? Was it the 3 new people? Was it the vehicle? What was it? So there's just this whole process that can add more clarity and transparency. And again, that's the boring part of government, but I wouldn't mind if government gets a little bit boring again too, right? It shouldn't always be a headline in the news about what the city commission did Monday night. People should hopefully be able to just go about their days and know that the garbage gets picked up. When I call police, they show up, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's
so. Would you say then, if anything, it would be major projects that you would at least put a freeze on for the time being? If you
put a pause, and part of that is what I've learned in the past is, again, when we talk about collaboration within departments, we've built facilities, but they, to my knowledge, they've all been standalone. So it's this building for police, this building for fire,
Right.
this building for public works. We built a new fire station down on 64th Avenue South, and that helps our community because it increases access to fire services, reduces the impact of our homeowners insurance because of that rating system and how that works. But why was there not a police substation added to that? Why was there not a garage for 3 or 4 snowplows to be parked out there as well to service that part of the community? Those types of things, it just makes me really curious. And then you take that beyond just city functions. How do we work with the county, park district, the school district, that when everyone's building these facilities, are there opportunities for collaborate? We built that, park district built the sports center out there, which is awesome and a jewel for our community. People from all over the state talk about how great it is. Could have been a police substation there. Could there have been another, it's something already taxpayers have paid for or are paying for. Why aren't we being smarter with how we do that instead of just building things out there? So again, that's my observation and things I've looked at. Again, how can we save taxpayers money? How can we reduce the growing budget? And some of that is just really being strategic in how we grow, both as a city, as an employer and a function, but also our entire community. New housing out. How do we do density inside so that we can create more tax space within the existing infrastructure? Those are all things that we can do to help reduce the burden on everyone and hopefully reduce the impact of property taxes specifically.
Nice.
Obviously, as being a part-time realtor, how else do you kind of expect to be able to create more affordable housing? I know you've kind of touched on a couple points here and there, but
yeah, that's tough because the cost of building, there's a lot of factors working against us, and it's universal around the country. So that's where density really becomes the solution. How do we build inward and limit our growth outwards, or do that more strategic? The first thing I'd want to do is just pull together all the stakeholders. Again, the mayor doesn't have to have all the answers, but the mayor has the power to bring people together to find the solution. The solutions exist in our community. Just are we tapping into folks? So bring in the home builders together, the realtors, people who are buying homes, affordable housing advocates. What is it? Some of it's regulations. Are there some regulations we can get rid of that reduce the cost of building? Of course, we want to make sure housing is safe, so that's going to be a priority, but there might be some things we can take off the books. Are there ways that we build our houses in terms of different types of housing? We're going through the conversation of the redevelopment of the land development code. So in neighborhoods like mine, right now, currently I have a garage and I'm not allowed to build an apartment on top of it because it can't be plumbed. What if we change those rules that says I could build an apartment or on top of my garage so my uncle can live with us? Pays me rent, reduces the costs on me, or a friend or whatnot. We have accessory dwelling units where people can build a 800 square foot house in the back corner of their lot. So things like that, I think will come to fruition and create opportunity. And what I get most excited about is, anytime we raise a challenge to our community, people rise up to confront it. And one thing I'd like to do is just put out a call for proposal. Ask people, the entrepreneurial spirit, the ideas that we have in this community about, I'm just throwing a number out there, 20 vacant lots across most of Fargo, let's say. How can you create duplexes or triplexes that people would want to live in to be in that housing that they could afford? And a lot of times it's going to be a housing hack. You're going to build it for you to live on one side and you're going to rent off the other side to pay your mortgage, and it's going to be affordable, right? But it's by putting that out there, I think the ideas will come forward, and then it's about how do we incentivize that. It doesn't always have to be the old way of incentivizing of we have this program that exists and a developer shows up and they just want to take advantage of it. But how do we do it that's going to benefit the homeowner, benefit the renter as well?
Do you think home prices in North Dakota in general, but in Fargo are going to start to creep down a little bit, or do you think they're going to stay high the way they are? Because if I think 5 years ago, if I didn't purchase my house when I purchased it, I would not be able to afford a home in Fargo.
Yeah. And you're right. And I mean, the joke in the realtor world, our used car salesman hat we put on is, the cheapest time to buy a house is today, not tomorrow.
That's so true.
Because it doesn't matter what the interest rates are, especially again in a community like Fargo where we have back back up. So the last 3 months don't count. So let's go a year before those last 3 months. We were starting to see how sellers or housing prices come down a little bit. Sellers had to discount prices. Buyers were able to get homes they wouldn't have gotten before. They weren't going into multiple offers. We were seeing a correction. And a lot of that, I think, was driven because buyers felt uncertainty. Interest rates kind of flattened out around that 6%, which is actually a good spot to be. But people were uncertain. And then something happened about 2 or 3 months ago where, my theory is that buyers got certain with the uncertainty. They just said, F it, let's just go start. And so then again, we're in multiple offers, prices are going up again. So we were below the national average from our house sales price in our metro region until COVID. We got caught up. And a lot of people will say things like Fargo is cheaper to live in than Minneapolis. And I think anyone that's lived in Minneapolis will tell you that's not true. Because again, now either the cost of housing, but even just the cost of goods. And so we have to figure out and be creative, and there's communities doing that. But
I find it crazy that, and because I have lots of friends that are young and don't have homes yet, or whatever it is, family members, whatever, they're telling me they're paying $1,900 for a 2-bedroom apartment, or they can't afford a townhome, which is half the square footage of my home, and it's the mortgage would be $2,000. I'm like, that's insane. Like, I don't see how people that are like my younger siblings would be able to afford a home at any point in their lives, really.
Is that why we're seeing so many damn apartment buildings being built? Is because they can't afford houses?
They're expensive
because it's
too,
a gold mine.
They're super expensive. Like, can we stop with the apartments?
The apartments are really ugly. I agree.
It's getting way too out of hand.
Yeah. So 54% of Fargoans rent. I think it ends up being skewed because we have a high college population, right? But we are seeing where people are trapped in renting. I think we're getting closer and closer to not just being a metro area of renters, but a nation of renters because of affordability. And part of that affordability, what I want to, and this isn't necessarily specific to the city of Fargo, but I'm planning to set up a meeting here shortly with the Bank of North Dakota, the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency, because when you went and got your mortgage, your lender is only going to allow you to use 30% of your household income for your mortgage, right? But the numbers you just used, your family members or friends, they're paying 60, 70% of their household income on rent. There are no caps on rent, and I'm not advocating for that. There's actually state law that says you can't cap rent in North Dakota. But is there a way we can get creative and say, okay, 30% and 60, 70% people are already paying. How do we credit that? How do we say, all right, we'll create a loan program that'll get you up to 50%. It's not going to cost the state anything other than putting away some guarantee money set in a savings account. And then we get someone from 70% of their income to 50%. They own a home. They're putting more money in their pocket because they're not even able to save for a down payment. So that's an advantage we have as North Dakota compared to most of the other states, because we have things like the Bank of North Dakota, which can be a financing tool to do some of this creative stuff for people. And that would be something that would benefit the entire state.
The last thing on this topic is the first-time home buyer is I think the cap is like $110,000 is what your income can be in a year, obviously, with whoever your household would be. So when you think of making $110,000 in a year, husband and wife or whatever, 2 people, 1 person, whatever it is, a home that you can buy in this area, considering you're paying for your vehicle, your insurances, you're paying for wherever you're living currently. Is there any way that you would be able to control raising that $110,000 first-time home buyer rule? I guess it is. Obviously, it would have to be higher than that in order to afford $275,000 home.
Yeah. Let me ask, are you talking about the North Dakota or Minnesota side?
North Dakota.
There's North Dakota? Okay. Because I say I know there's different programs for first-time home buyers, so that might have been a specific one, because I know that there's others. But you may not get a discounted interest rate. It might be you get closing costs, or they all kind of have their
ways.
Yep. So again, that's a conversation I think more with the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency for us to have and to hear. And again, even just going back to communities like Langdon, they can't build a $350,000 house. It becomes a $420,000 house just because the labor and to get the product out there. That's where programs like the Housing Incentive Fund, or even Governor Armstrong has advocated for a program that helps with the infrastructure costs for a community to be able to build, so to take that off the homeowners or the property owners bill. And that's where those programs help, because there's not going to be someone that can buy that $420,000 house. But if we can get them down and it's only $350,000 because we're subsidizing $70,000, it gets people into home ownership and locks them into that community, and their kids go to that school. That's a win for all of us.
And that would be absolutely huge for Fargo if we didn't have 70% of people renting and they were actually owning their homes. So I think that
less apartment buildings.
That would be a huge thing to figure out as quickly as possible, because we get more people to stay, like you said. Right. I mean, that's what we want. So especially those people that are getting those high paying jobs elsewhere. So
when I think even looking differently at access to home ownership. So I'm hearing more and more from people who say that they don't want to own a home.
Yeah.
You know, they like the flexibility. And that's not just, younger generation, but even older generation. But again, being a Northsider, I call my little old ladies, there's a number of them that still are in their homes. That would be great entry-level homes, but there's not senior living available for them on the north side. It's all on the south side. And as Northsiders, they're not moving to the south side. So they're staying in that home. But if we could figure out a way to create, an affordable condo building up there, or, a rental that they would be comfortable with, I could give you 15 to 20 houses that become available that'd be under that.
That is true. There's a lot of retirement communities that are in south side.
There is. They're nice, beautiful.
They're really nice.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. But, and that's where, again, where the role the city plays is in our urban design, right? There's a lot of talk about, the economic engine that is downtown, and that's true. A lot of that also is, it's walkability, it's vitality, it's people are excited because you can do a lot of things in one spot. But what does that look like if we do something up in the Hornbachers area, North Fargo, or down on Rolt Farm area, 25th and 32nd, or other neighborhoods where we start pulling those neighborhoods together and say, this commercial district's 30, 40 years old and it's a little dry. What do you want to see here? What would make you want to stay here or spend more time here? And then, you bring in groups like Folkways, which they plan events for downtown, and we bring them to communities like that. So then now you got downtowners going to South Fargo for the annual Apple Festival or whatever that neighborhood is hosting for the event that's creating community and keeping people engaged and connecting with their neighbors. That's, I think, the power of that urban design. In our old way of doing it is you'd kind of always have this commercial that would insulate from residential, but we're seeing now where people want that mix, right? You want a downtown experience where you live everywhere throughout town. The lights down in West Fargo, right? That was a model that was going to be recreated before that guy in his Ponzi scheme, screwed it up for everyone. But every community in the state basically was getting ready to build
was
a
that
right.
Epic?
Yeah. So
they have never found him, right? Is he gone?
I guess he's at the Buffalo Wild Wings in Minot often, but for some reason
they just
sheriff.
can't catch
I was going to say, they know where he is for sure.
Exactly. So
with that being said, how do you feel about the flock cameras?
yeah. So you guys, this is the
Good
first
transition.
time publicly I've been asked about it. It comes up on social media. So what I've learned about it is, well, I'll just answer it. They're concerning to me because we don't know where that data is going. We don't know how the information is being used. What law enforcement has shared is that they've been very useful in helping solve crimes, especially when we talk about traffic violations, right? We're told that they are license plate readers, but they're much more powerful, or they have more data and information than
100%.
that. And that's what I want to tap.
They identify facial features and stuff
Yep.
too.
My understanding is they'd be able to tell the police department where I was today,
Yeah.
based on what the data that's in there. So the questions I've learned that we have to ask, and I want to know as mayor and look at our contract with those cameras is, where's the data going? Who has access to it? Do you have to have a warrant or a specific ID number to be able to access it? Because anyone who has access to that software theoretically is going to be able to just go look you up
Anytime. And if it's like
Find your route, find what you do.
If the police chief has a crazy ex-girlfriend that he wants to pester, he can look that up and see what she's doing.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. I think there needs to be a chain of custody, 100%.
Yep. And we have to be able to publicly talk about that so people
Absolutely.
have confidence in the system.
I can tell you that is one thing that keeps coming up in these mayoral talks on our podcast is talk about the flock cameras.
Yep.
One thing I brought up was when I was driving down interstate, I ran into somebody's freaking furniture in the middle of the interstate, smoked my car.
Oh.
It was like $7,000 to fix it. Luckily, insurance took care of most of it, but it would have been nice to find that guy, whoever had their furniture shit fall off, to have them pay for it. But I think, like you said, I think there's some good to it to be able to solve crime, but there's also that other side too that's very scary.
Well, and from when we talk about public safety, that balance of surveillance, right? Of where's our comfort level of we feel more safe because things are being documented, or it might be a deterrent for certain behaviors. But until I'm on the other side of that in terms of being surveilled,
Well, and it's
the concerns.
The real scary part is the rise of AI. Eventually, they're gonna get drones that'll go and find you.
Yeah.
And they use these cameras to find you. I mean, there's been a movie that was. You guys ever see the movie Eagle Eye with Shia LaBeouf?
Oh yeah,
Came out a long time ago. But it's pretty much the same thing. Like you're constantly being tracked everywhere you go. They can find you. Like these AI or whatever it is.
When I don't know how old you get, so I just turned 44 last week. So my generation, we started using cell phones and cameras in our 20s. Still, I'm still not aware of how much I'm being documented, right? And it actually was the Boston bomber, the Boston Marathon bomber, was my first aha of that because, if you remember, they pieced together where those guys walked because it went from an ATM camera to a gas station camera to like they could follow where those guys walked on the street. And I don't think about that as much as I do now in the last year because, again, we constantly see surveillance. But, younger generation is used to just having the cameras are out all the time, right? And it's always being documented personally. But then in public, what does that mean?
Yeah. We got to think about all the tracking that your apps and everything do in your phone too. Yeah. I mean, granted, those things probably need a subpoena of some sort to get access to, but you can see everywhere you've been today just based on your Instagram or Snapchat app being open as you're roaming around. You know what I mean? That all your information is being tracked.
Yeah.
Your
Again,
location.
who has access to that, right? That's the other thing is it require a warrant to access that information? And we're seeing, I think, that slip farther and farther away, especially with data breaches and, some of this, whether it's an app I'm using and being followed that way.
Yeah.
But I also unwittingly or whatever, didn't know that was happening in a lot of these apps, right? You have to stop and think about my weather app, how it's just supposed to be the weather based where I'm at, but it's also tracking where I'm going. So that's how it's telling me where the weather is, right?
Well, location services.
I mean, what happens if you look like somebody too? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm wondering if that had anything to do with that Angela Lips thing. If she, the only reason why her picture popped up is because she looks like somebody else. I don't know. Yeah.
And she was in I assume, a database because of previous
prior history. Absolutely.
So, but again, maybe she cleaned up her life and had moved on beyond all that, right? But then because of AI or that use of technology. So that's where, I've said for a while, if we're going to be implementing evolving technology in the city, whether it's through law enforcement, whether it's through public works, whether it's through any other, the reading of water meters, which is one of the tools people are going to be able to see their water usage in real time. We have to have those conversations with the public and see where their comfort level is on some of that. Some of it might be great and save us money and create efficiencies, but if it means we have to give up some of our individual liberties, that's worth having a conversation about.
Here's a good transition from the flock cameras right into COVID. Okay, so there was orders put out that people were reporting people for not wearing masks. Okay. So you being a mayor, how do you handle something like COVID? Because I can tell you it ruined a lot of people's lives. And it was, granted, we didn't know what we know now. I wish we did back then. But knowing what we know now, if something, and it's all over the news now, every other day there's a new freaking virus being passed around.
Hantavirus.
Knowing what we know now, so how would you handle that as a mayor if that came down to you got another guy like Fauci that's up there saying, nope, shut her down, put masks on, stay indoors. And if you don't, you're going to get a fine. We're going to use these new flock cameras that we got to find you and send you a fine in the mail for going outside.
Yeah. When you nailed on the head, we didn't know what we didn't know back then. And now we do. And I think lessons learned can help us make better decisions in the future. So I was the minority leader during COVID. And so daily on the call, the governor and the four caucus leaders regularly had phone calls, getting updates from the governor in terms of what public health and National Guard was telling him, how are we responding to different things. The biggest conversation there became about student athletics, right? It was, when can we open up? When can we start having basketball games again and things like that? So, and Governor Burgum took a lot of heat because he shut everything down and then slowly started opening things up. But, I guess more directly to your question about how would I handle that, it's hard for me to say. I mean, I'm not going to say I'd shut everything down or I wouldn't shut anything down because I don't know what we're dealing with. But what I will know is that we have that experience of 6 years ago to understand how people responded and what people had to give up in different situations and try to balance that much better from that experience.
Yeah, that was tough. I remember waking up, and I was on the Minnesota side at the time, but waking up and seeing that there was like yellow cross flags on the slides and stuff like that. So like you couldn't use the park.
Public park, sure.
Yeah.
Which this wasn't even really a public park in all reality. There was no name on it or anything like that. So it was just right next to the complex that we lived in. And I was like,
me
and
my friends joke often about, or you'll see a meme on Instagram come across about, the way we dressed ourselves to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
We left our groceries in the garage, all those, but then
spray them down.
2 weeks later we changed
that time period pisses me off so bad because of the dumb shit that we did. It was so stupid. Even like some of the cops that we know, they would get calls all the time about people reporting kids in the park for not wearing masks or hanging out together. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh man, if we ever go through that again, I really do hope people smarten up by then. I really do. I really do hope. And I can tell you, I was working with the National Guard. I got activated and I was working one of the testing sites. People lost their freaking mind when COVID happened around here. Yeah. They were psycho. They were like seething at the mouth if they saw you without a mask on. It was so bad.
Well, and you see the impacts of, I think truly for our entire community about isolationism, people staying home, concerned about their health, but then really staying home and not interacting with the world or how people changed how they interacted. And we're seeing that impact and that's how and why certain people reacted different ways because we also aren't built to be isolated people.
Right.
And think about what we taught the youth at that time, though. A lot of kids that were in their primary learning phases.
Devastated.
You know what I mean? Now today, they don't do jack. They don't go outside. They don't, like to go to public places, grocery stores. It's really weird, the mind screw that we put into them.
When we interact with those COVID kids, I can tell you that they cannot look you in the eye. They have zero self-confidence. They don't know how to talk to adults. And the learning aspect of it completely devastated them. Like they're going to be very challenged going into adult life from now on.
When I don't think it was just COVID, but COVID played a factor in that because these cell phones are another
Absolutely.
piece of
During that time period was even worse.
Yeah.
But it really taught them that they can still experience the world through their phone even harder, and now that's what most of this generation of kids live with. Is like, my kids are culprits. You know what I mean? I'm always, every time I see them, I'm like, get off your phone. Like you're always on your phone. They're like, I'm hardly on my phone. Then you look at their thing; it's been hours per day that they're on their phone. So yeah, I think it made a lot of crazy stuff happen. And I think one of the key things that at least the people we know within this community are looking for in the next mayor is going to be, how do we handle things like that going forward? As a small business owner, I mean, it completely devastated our business for sure. You know what I mean? And I had tons of people within the community attacking my business for wanting to be anti some of these rules or wanting to have a differing opinion about what we thought was going on, or siding with one side or the other about, what's really happening here versus what we're being told is happening, et cetera. So I think it's huge for whoever becomes mayor to really have a stronghold on how they're going to react to these things, even if it comes from the top.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that, you talked about the way we treated each other, right? You're on one side or the other, and that's just continued to evolve.
Oh, we've been divided ever since.
Right. And how do we get back to being a community that can disagree with each other? I don't agree 100% with my family, so why should I expect I have to agree 100% with my president, my governor, my mayor?
We shouldn't have to.
But understand that we can have a conversation and we can work through it and
yes,
and instead of turning against each other. And that's what is just unfortunate about where we are.
I think that's what big politics did to us, though. Yeah. I think they wanted us divided because we're easier to control that way.
Well, and going back to, I think it was something you had said about you referenced kind of back and forth, and I don't know if that meant specifically within political parties or whatnot, but that's where I just get more and more of a fan of, I'd love to see a strong multi-party system across our country. I look at what some of these countries that have more of a parliamentary form of government, First you start off by building compromise because you might have 10 political parties, but you have to build a coalition to get a majority to even form the government, and or in some of these, if they don't pass a budget, an election is forced. It goes right to an election. You didn't do your job. It's time for people to be able to have an opportunity to have a new say. Some of those things that how we, government makes a lot of rules for itself and expects the public to follow one set of rules. Maybe we follow a different set of rules, but how do we flip that upside down? Again, it's for the people, by the people, and how do we get back to that?
Yeah. We're missing that big time.
If you watch any of these people when they're talking about a bill, it's always, my partners are my colleagues across the aisle, the Republicans, the Democrats. It's them blaming each other the whole entire time. Meanwhile, they're not actually doing what they're sent there to do. They're just there bitching, and then they collect their whatever paycheck. Their special interest groups are paying them, whatever it is. Somehow they end up having tens of millions of dollars when they leave. Don't know how, but they're not representing us, and they haven't for a long time. So people like us are fed up with it. Absolutely. So we don't even consider we're like apolitical right now. We just want people to actually give a shit about what we're going through and what we need to have representation. Yeah. You know what I mean? Democrat, Republican doesn't mean shit to us anymore. It really doesn't. It's who's going to represent us as Americans.
And that's where my analysis of we continue to see voter participation go down over the last decade or more. And so much of that, I think, is driven by what I call the decision makers. So the people who aren't locked into one side or the other, just saying, I'm exhausted. It doesn't matter if I vote or not, whether it's for mayor or president or anything in between. And that's unfortunate because those are the true decision makers. They are the ones that I think really help bring balance. And when we see that loss of balance, because then it's only the people who show up, and depending on where you live or the way the boundary lines have been drawn will determine already that well before the election day.
I do have a question. This is more of a hypothetical, probably never, ever would happen in this state. But let's just say, for instance, let's just say the governor wants to strip everybody of their Second Amendment rights. Like, let's say ban guns altogether. Is that something that you, A, would do, or B, can not abide by the governor's ruling?
Yeah. So, I don't know if you've met Kelly Armstrong, our governor, but
yes, I have. He's
very
big hunter. That's why I said it would never happen. But let's say in the future, we get some crazy guy or whoever it is, whatever.
No, I mean, we have our fundamental rights of the Bill of Rights. Would I like to see more regulation on firearms? Yes.
What kind of regulations?
Does that mean that people have to give up the right to be able to carry a firearm? No. We can continue. To answer your question about what would I like to see more of, I think more of what type of weapons are being sold, how we monitor how do we make sure who can have what types of weapon, fully implement background checks, make sure that there's waiting periods, things like that help reduce the violent crimes. And that's my outcome, is how do we reduce those mass casualty violent events? Because again, the majority of firearm owners are responsible. They lock them up. They make sure that kids don't have access to them. But there are people who don't do that. And how do we hold those folks accountable so that we don't continue to see erosion?
They're starting to do that now, aren't they? Like, where the parents are being charged with it. Like, it's if there's a kid that's goes to school and shoots up school, parents are being charged now, right?
Yeah, I think there were, recently or sometime within the last year, there was parents were held accountable.
So hopefully that clicks in most people's heads that they needed to lock them up. But
do you think that the majority of violent crimes with guns happen with people who legally own them?
I think a fair number do. I can't answer it exactly. So both cases, right? Because it's also easy for me to go, if I know my brother who has firearms, I know where they are in his house. If I wanted to do something, I could go take him. He wouldn't even know, right? That's some of the stories. The case I think you talked about just recently, if I remember correctly, the parents, I think, actually bought the weapon for the young person, as a gift or something like that. Or it actually, I think, even maybe raised some concerns about his behavior and then didn't.
Well, he was on an FBI's wanted list, or not wanted, radar.
Watch,
but they just let him do whatever. I don't know.
Right.
That's kind of weird, but
yeah. So again, most people are doing the right thing. It's just how do we reduce, and for me, it's the type of weapons that people have access to, and then how do we slow down people's access to it, especially if they want it right now. You know, if I'm planning ahead, if I'm going on my big hunting trip in Wyoming, I should know probably 3 days before I'm going what type of firearm I'm going to be taking with me. Right?
Sure.
So, because I got to get it there too. So, what are the rules on me taking that firearm across, whether it's by flight or by driving?
Yeah. I guess I can agree with that. I think there's certain people that probably shouldn't have them, but on the flip side, I have a very untrustworthy about anything right now.
About the government, yeah.
I am.
But again, I think that's a matter of how do we find compromise in that? How do we have a real conversation? Because we know the majority of gun owners also agree, you know, stronger background checks and limiting certain, you know, so, but we don't ever get to a compromise conversation because it's digging in on, you're trying to take all my guns away and you're a mass murderer just because you support firearms, you know, like there's an in-between where most of us live. And
well, I think the problem, Josh, is when you get states like Minnesota that want to ban something altogether, that's where you run into the issue, because then more and more people start talking about it. They get scared, and then they go out and buy more firearms, and then they dig their heels in more. So, I mean, granted, that's Minnesota, but that doesn't really affect us here in North Dakota. But
people would say the opposite about North Dakota, where we have legislators introducing bills to say we want to build ammunition manufacturing just to give the finger to states like Minnesota and other, right? So because they do that, we're going to do something on the opposite end of it to be even more friendly to gun owners or the industry. Instead of, again, how do we make sure, you know, North Dakota is the only state in the country where we haven't had a mass casualty event with kids.
That's kind of creepy.
Yep. And every day that it doesn't happen, we get closer to it possibly happening.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about.
But
you know, we have, thankfully, we have law enforcement who
RSOs
that RSOs. But I'm just going even back to, you know, Officer Wallin and others. You know, lost their life in the line of duty, saving. But we almost then would have had a mass casualty event in our state. You know, just downtown Fargo. But law enforcement was able to respond.
I do question that though. Again, that guy was on someone's radar. That Barcat guy was on someone's radar. Yeah. So I don't know. But
then again, at what point do you? Where's the line? You're on someone's radar, and I'm just going to confiscate all your weapons just in case.
I don't know how deep it was, but I know that he was known to the FBI at some juncture. Sure. So if Syrian background came in 2013, looking up mass casualty events, he was on the radar. It just seems like they would be sophisticated enough to have that pop, but I don't know what kind of systems they use. I don't know how that works. Not sure. But it just, like I said, I'm very untrustworthy about any 3-letter agency now. And so I have to ask all the questions now. Sure. And now I'm second guessing everything. We've had Zach Robinson on here. He's a buddy of mine. He plays hockey with me. If it wasn't for those guys, like, that could have been devastating.
Right.
Absolutely devastating. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. That's for sure. It's a tough one. Like, I've got friends that say absolutely no restrictions whatsoever to everybody. And I'm like, there's no freaking way. Yeah. You can't. There's no way.
Again, the challenge is we just back away from having the conversation altogether then, right? Because it's become so heated or divisive instead of, okay, where can we agree on, you know, starting, is it background? Is it type of, I don't know, but what's the starting conversation to figure out how do we make sure people are safer? People can walk around freely in this community, you know, with their registered firearm, concealed carry, and at the same time, other people can feel safe knowing that there's not going to be some sort of event happening to them.
Right on.
You know,
excellent. All right, couple last questions. Then I'd like to get into a little quick rapid fire with you before we end it, if that's all right. So if you are elected as mayor, what's a decision that you would make public right now that the city government seems to keep behind closed doors?
A decision that I'd make.
Yeah.
That nobody knows about.
Like something that gets talked about behind closed doors. Like, I think you brought something up earlier about pepcorn and
the finance committee.
yeah, stuff
Yeah.
like that. So like, is there anything else that comes to mind that typically stays behind closed doors that you would like to make more public?
I haven't thought of anything beyond the budget because again, that was so new that the finance committee was. I don't want to say they met in secret, but it wasn't known when they were meeting, and then it really wasn't until the final moments that the budget was put out there for even the commissioners to see. So I will say adamantly, I've said that I won't sign non-disclosure agreements. One of the things I'll do if elected mayor is I'm going to create a code of ethics for the office, and one of those is going to be the mayor won't sign a non-disclosure agreement. If the public can't know about it, why should I, as the representative of the public, have any prior knowledge to that?
That's good. That's transparency.
Yep.
I like that.
Can I just ask one thing? It seems like everybody asked it. Where would you like the convention center?
Convention center. I get in trouble because every time I say it's not my decision to make, I want the current commission to make it and get it done with. I think both have pros and cons to it.
Okay.
They are in the downtown core area, so that's important to me compared to some of the other locations. So I like the Civic Center location because it takes the Civic Center off the books of the city. It's been a stranded asset that they haven't maintained or utilized to drive revenue. There's also 2 city buildings that could be sold off as part of that. So some one-time revenue that can come into the city to build up the reserves or address immediate needs. But Bruhala, those guys they've shown they can put together a space, they can put together an experience, and development would hopefully follow around there to kind of some of that. It's not blighted, but it's a industrial kind of area that
it could use some sprucing up.
That could be spruced up quite a bit,
for sure.
So there's pros and cons to that. The Bruhala have said that they will, absorb any losses from the operating standpoint, so that wouldn't fall onto the city. But they want to create a TIF district, which there's not much tolerance right now for tax incentives for that development around them. Whereas the Civic Center, there is a downtown TIF center that they could tap into that they say if there's an operating loss, you could use that TIF, the reserves in that TIF account to cover that. And it wouldn't be on the city's books, but it would be part of that TIF district. So again, the current city commission, it's at their feet and they are, still pushing forward. They're trying to get this apples to apples to make sure that we're not putting the city in a bind. The voters want it. I want it from a standpoint of the economic drive it's going to bring. There's a lot of conventions and conferences that Bismarck and Grand Forks get that Fargo can't get. And I don't think the Alaris Center or the Bismarck Event Center will stand toe-to-toe with our convention center once it gets built. You've seen these ideas of what these folks want to put together. All the developers, even the first 9, it's pretty exciting what they're looking to do to create an experience for Fargo.
Cool.
Especially when we know that people always have low expectations when they come here to visit. And
Right.
they're always pleasantly, they walk away smiling usually and like, wow, I didn't expect that in Fargo. So to have a convention center that can help show that off would be important.
Another big conversation that's going on kind of right now, especially on like Facebook and stuff like that, is the casino that's going to be built in Moorhead. How do you feel that's going to affect the city of Fargo? Do you think that would benefit us or would it hurt us?
Well, as a blackjack player, I was pretty excited to see that. But actually, in the last week, I've had a number of conversations with business owners on the Fargo side. They're very concerned because that we'll see a shift of people, that would go downtown or the lights or anything for their entertainment.
Go to the casino.
To go to the casino, and not necessarily just to gamble, but they could bring concerts. And boxing matches and things like that. That again, how do we activate the Civic Center to do that if that's not chosen as a site? How do we make sure the Fargo Dome is doing more? You got the Shields Arena, which is privately owned, and they're doing a lot, but Blue Stem, and unfortunate with what's happened with Jade Presents folding, that's a huge hit, not just to those of us that love attending those events, but you got vendors who depended on that for their work. A lot of small business, food trucks, small business owners that depend on those events to get them through the summer. And of course, the community experience. People love going, especially Blue Stem, but Up District, Fargo Theater, all those other places, Jade put on a good show. So I hope someone's able to step up and fill that void.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. You ready for some rapid fire?
Let's do it.
So these are mostly just going to be yes or no or short responses. And then at the end of it, you can explain yourself a little more detailed if you wish to. All right. So to start off with, biggest misconception about Fargo.
That we're West Minneapolis or whatever that's supposed to be.
Okay. Little Minneapolis.
Little Minneapolis. Yeah.
All right. Biggest misconception about you.
That I'm a polished politician. It's something I keep getting the last couple of weeks is I guess I speak well. I don't know. And that's being dinged against me, but so yeah.
All right. Downtown Fargo, better or worse than 5 years ago?
Worse.
One city project you would start tomorrow.
It's tough when you say city, like the city of Fargo owns it or community.
Yeah. Either or.
Well, for me, so I'll take the latter, the community. We're seeing that midtown area of Fargo really disrupted right now. The Hornbacher's Express,
yes,
Shields Home and Hardware closing. Like, what happens now? I mean, do we continue to lose? How do we make sure we can drive so that nothing else, another grocery store comes in or another hardware store type place can come in and, us as Northsiders even use those facilities, right? And so to lose that just means things are being driven even farther out from the core of the city.
Right. I think that's e-commerce is hurting a lot of business like that for sure. All right. How about one city project that you would stop tomorrow?
I can't think of it. I don't know what. I guess the closest thing I would say is flock cameras until we have better answers about that.
Okay. Good. All right. More police or we're good where we're at?
I think more police, but with specialization. So it may not always be a licensed law enforcement officer, but especially I think of that like entry level work. That what can we do to build up the police force from a training standpoint, but also take some work off of our current police force.
Awesome. All right. Biggest challenge Fargo faces in the next decade?
Our growth.
Managing
it.
And then if elected, what's the first phone call you make?
First phone call I make. Well, I'll answer it my own way. The first thing I've said that I'll do is create an affordable housing task force. So bring in the realtors, the home builders, others to figure this out because that's part of our responsible growth. We actually, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's current growth plans that developers have in place that the city has just put a halt to. Because if we grow to where they want to grow, we need to hire new snowplow drivers. Can law enforcement get out there during a blizzard? Things like that. Those are some serious things. And that's the unfortunate thing. Again, the city, I think, is reacting when we've had a master growth plan for years. Why aren't we planning for this? Right now, there's only 120 lots for sale in all of City of Fargo.
That's insane.
So that's going to drive up prices.
Yeah.
So how are we working to get ahead and stay ahead of some of this so that we can reduce costs, make sure that it's appropriate growth, but also balance the budget?
Ban on flavored tobacco products or no? No. Okay.
I want to reduce access to kids, but
sure,
adults are gonna
leave Big League Chew bubblegum alone, right?
Strawberry.
Yeah. All right, and then final question: if elected, how does the city of Fargo residents hold you accountable over the next 4 years?
Well, there'll be an election in 4 years if I decide to run. So that'll be how they ultimately hold me accountable. But really it'll be about, do people feel safer in this community? Have we got the budget right-sized? Those are the two biggest things that I want along, and then the affordable housing, so the smart growth. So are we doing those things or are we not? Those are the three things that I plan to measure myself by. So I'll be asking the folks to hold me accountable to that too.
Awesome. It's awesome. Is there anything else that didn't come out in this interview that you wanted to elaborate on or kind of speak to the people about?
No, I just, pretty accessible for folks to get out to vote. So you can learn more about me, joshforfargo.com. We also have all the ways you can vote this week into Election Day on June 9th on there. So, you can early vote at the Fargo Dome, the Ramada on 13th, in the Fargo Sports Center from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. any day this week. And then Tuesday, June 9th, I believe it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at those three sites, along with a variety of other places across town. So
awesome.
Get out and vote.
Sounds good. And Josh, we want to thank you for coming on to our show, man. We appreciate the time. It was a little tough to get a hold of you, but I think we finally figured out how to get you, right?
Yeah.
Just chase the algorithm. But no, it was a great conversation, man. I hope people really take the time to listen to what you have to say, and everyone goes out and makes a good decision when they vote. And best of luck to you, man.
Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate the opportunity and look forward to continuing to tuning in. So
Awesome.
have me back on when I'm mayor. We'll talk more.
We'll do that. Sounds good. Everybody else, we appreciate you checking us out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the channel. Tell your friends about us. Don't tell your friends about us. Talk good, talk bad. It doesn't really matter as long as you were talking about us. Peace.